So we're really happy today to have as our guest Gina Lake, who has been doing some channeling work for quite a number of years now, particularly with Jesus, since 2012, I guess it is. I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more, talk about how she began to do this kind of work. I'd just like to say something in the beginning very briefly about the whole process of channeling. Just that there's nothing new about this. I often think that, especially with poets from ages back, you read Rumi, read Hafiz, Rumi in particular, and you're reading A Course in Miracles. The Cloud of Unknowing from the 14th century, channeled works, other works like, oh my goodness, I was making a list of The Impersonal Life by Joseph Brenner from the early part of the 20th century. Also, The Prophet by Gibran. When you read The Prophet, you go, whoa, kind of who wrote this? This is clearly inspired divine work. Let me tell you just a little bit about how I met Helen and Bill. I met Helen and Bill in 1973 at a Course in Miracles conference where I was one of the speakers. I was president of the New York chapter at that time. And Helen and Bill came, and they came to a presentation I did. But they were really there, I think, I can't confirm this, but I think would have to be the case, because the keynote speaker was Hugh Lynn Casey, Edgar Casey's son. And I don't know for sure that this happened, but I very imagine that they had a special session with Hugh Lynn. I think that's design was set there. Bill, I know, is very impressed with reading There's a River and some of the works of Casey. So when the Course in Miracles came along, it's just really exciting. As you know, it's our central focus. It's got a great depth to it, but at the same time, the Course also says there are many systems of thought. So this is only one way, and Jesus has never stopped speaking, and there's a lot of other processes by which that becomes true. I've been reading some of the works of Gina Lake, or what she's been taking down, particularly most lately her dialoguing with Jesus. And I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more. Let me go to get it. Let's go, we'll do a couple more slides, but let's do this first. I want to let you know that everybody who's here today is going to get a free subscription to Miracles Magazine. I should add, if you're new, if you're already a subscriber, you're not going to get a free subscription. But anybody who's joining us for the first time, in order to do that, we have to have your address, though. I'm assuming in many cases we do, but if you just signed up online and we don't have that information, you need to contact us at our website or through the phone number which you see at the bottom of the screen. Slide. So this is our co-host, Reverend Bud James. Bud's a graduate of our seminary here in New York, All Faith Seminary. He's also an instructor and consultant in information technologies and the U.S. Air Force Special Operations veteran. And Bud, you want to say a word about our intermission and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we're going to have a wonderful interaction between Gina and John. We're going to take a quick break, have a little bit of fun there, and then when we come back, we'll open it up to questions and answers. If you have a question that comes up along the way, feel free to drop it in chat. I'll put all the questions together and we'll go over that and see if we've got, often we have similar questions, so we'll put them together that way and share them. And then if you want to come on and go ahead and just speak in person, you can do that as well. We'd ask you to raise your hand using the reaction button, and we'll walk through everyone in the order they raise their hand. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Bud. So beginning about 5 to 1 until about 5 after 1, we're going to have a break and intermission. It's going to come on screen. It will say intermission. There'll be some music playing in the background. And our clock will also tell you, 9 minutes left, 8 minutes left, that sort of thing, before we can begin again. You can go off and have a sandwich, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. Slide. So the music, by the way, that we have, that we're going to be playing is it's called A Course in Miracles from Jeff Olmsted. Jeff was the music director of the church that I and Diane Burke founded and served throughout the 1990s in New York City. Slide. couple things coming up. In 2 weeks from today, I'm going to have on Dietrich Walsek. I watched Dietrich work when he was at the conference in New York in 2015. I was very impressed. He's a great therapist. He's written a book called Choose Again. He's got this process that he takes people through that really helps to waken them up. I'm very happy to have him on in 2 weeks from today. Slide. Also, let you know, I continue to teach classes on Tuesday evening and Thursday afternoons. It's the same class, it's a different time, on the teachings of A Course in Miracles. I'm working on one now on the metaphysics of the Course. But that's going to end in 3 more weeks, and then beginning in November, I'm just going to do a 6-week session on the practical applications of A Course in Miracles principles. If you'd like to think about signing up for that, or even the one that's going on now, you can join at any point. You can just go to our website and you'll find out how to do that. Slide. So 10% of everything that comes in today, we want to let you know, goes to Feed America. And thank you for that. Appreciate it. I think that's really all of our announcements. So let's go to Gina. Gina and I will come on screen. And let me move this out of the way here. Hi, Gina.
Hi, John.
Thank you so much for saying yes to coming on and being with us.
Oh, well, thank
Enjoying
you
your
for having me.
Yeah, and Gina's also done some writing for Miracles Magazine, which we appreciated a great deal. Thank you for that as well. Actually, I think the place I'd like to start is just to talk a bit about how you got started in this whole process of not only hearing, but communicating what Jesus had to share with you and now sharing with all of us.
Yeah, well, it started a long time ago. Excuse me, Mike. I guess I have some frogs.
Yeah, I understand. Believe me.
35 years ago, 1986, I was taking a shower one day and I posed a question in my head. I don't even remember what the question was. And I got an answer. And the answer was definitely not coming from my own mind. It was clear to me. So I kept posing questions and I realized that I suddenly was able to channel. So I could easily dialogue with beings. I could just say something and they would respond. They, with beings on other dimensions they can read your mind. They know everything that you're thinking. And so if you open your channel to them, or if you have the capacity to be a channel and you open to them, they can speak to you and you can have a dialogue with them. Well, I was 35 years old and I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world. And being really, really naive, I thought, oh, goody, I don't have to make any of my own choices. I don't have to be like everybody else. I can, I'll just know things and I'll just be able to know everything. And I was so naive, I didn't understand how channeling worked because, in fact, beings who channel to us, at least the higher beings, will not interfere with our free will, and they don't tell us what to do, and they don't make choices for us, and they shouldn't be making choices for us. They don't tell us what's going to happen or what's going on behind the scenes or anything like that, but I didn't know that. So I did learn that. Kind of the hard way in the first year of channeling. And then it was such a harrowing year, I stopped channeling for 2 years. And I decided I was not grounded enough, that I was not mature enough to channel. And so I actually met my second husband, who was a healer, and he did a lot of healing work on me. And I started doing a serious practice of meditation. And I just laid off channeling for a couple years. And it really got to a different place because I had learned a lot from my first year of channeling. I learned a lot of kind of negative lessons of what not to do, right? Not to give away your power. It was an important lesson for me and for all channels too. And so after about 2 years of meditation and healing work, a being showed up in my meditation and said, "May I speak to you?" and introduced himself as Theodore. And then he asked if he could write a book through me. And I thought, well, there can be no harm in that. I'll see if it's interesting. So I wrote down a book, and that was the beginning of a very fruitful relationship with this being who became my mentor, my healer, my therapist, my teacher in every way, friend, you could say, but they aren't really friends, they're not buddies. There's a very professional relationship that higher beings hold towards you, and they're very respectful, and they don't kid around and joke around. They're very kind of serious, very grown up. And so we started writing books in the 90s when I was into New Age things. And this was before I had an awakening. So I was writing about astrology. I wrote an astrology book. They helped me with that because I was an astrologer. I was working as an astrological counselor at the time. So that was through the 90s. And then I had an awakening in 1999. And that just really shifted everything for me. I could say a whole lot about that, but in any event, I moved into a period where I didn't teach or write or counsel really, or do anything. I married my third husband, Nirmala, who's my wonderful husband now. And I just did art, and I did some things around the house. But I stopped writing and teaching for 5 years because this awakening that I had just shifted me into such a different place of, just knowing the truth, but not knowing really what to do with that or what my new role might be in the world. And that didn't become clear for 5 years when Theodore showed up one day and he said, "Would you like to write a book about awakening?" And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." So then we wrote Radical Happiness. And that was the first of a series of about 8 books that Theodore wrote through me, all about awakening, about the truth, about the same things that I'm writing about now with Jesus. So they're all relevant. All those previous books are relevant. But in 2012, I had another really important shift. It was a deepening. And I started having, I was on a retreat. I went on a 2-week silent retreat away from my husband, away from home. So I was just on my own and writing in a spiritual log all the time and just being totally quiet. And I was walking around the grounds at one point, and I sat down in front of a statue of Mother Mary. And I sat there and looked at the statue, and the statue came alive. And Mary started speaking to me in my head. I could hear her really clearly. And she said that she would like to write a small book through me, and that Jesus would be coming and he would like me to write some books for him. And so I thought, oh, okay. I said, yeah. I said, okay, that's interesting. I didn't really know what that meant. So then after I got home, I began having a lot of mystical experiences. In other words, I wasn't just hearing Theodore or being able to channel easily. I was also seeing beings in my mind's eye when I was closing my eyes. And so I started writing those things down, and I've written some of those things on my website. But that period lasted about 2 years. So it sort of made my experience of other dimensions more 3-dimensional, because it wasn't just a voice in my head, which was very real and very true to me, but to add the visual and to add the whole sense, more of an energetic sense of other beings, other ascended masters, on the higher dimensions, it was a more embodied experience, a more full-blown experience of other dimensions than I had ever had. And I felt very much held and very much protected and very much a part of the Ascended Master circle that they showed to me. I experienced a kind of initiation by this circle of Ascended Masters. And then Jesus stepped forward and said, that he would like to write books through me. And I said, okay, but do I have to say that they're from you? Because that's weird, you know?
Important.
Because my husband is a non-dual teacher, and all of my teachings from Theodore were non-dual teachings, and I was in the non-dual community, and they don't really acknowledge metaphysics or channeling. So when I was writing those books from Theodore, I put channeling in the background. The books came through in my own voice, and I wasn't really, people knew I was a channel, but I wasn't talking about it, and I wasn't verbally channeling or doing anything very obvious with it. So for me to come out and say, I'm channeling Jesus now, and these are books from Jesus, it was a huge step for me, because right there, I didn't fit into the non-dual community so well anymore, at least not the segment of the non-dual community that I was used to fitting into or trying to fit into. So it was a big decision, but it actually was a no-brainer. It was a choiceless choice. There was no saying no to that, because of course, I could feel Jesus's energy, and I wanted to see what he would write. And what came through was the Jesus trilogy, the very first book, and it was beautiful. And so, you know, the proof is in the pudding, right? By their fruits you will know them. And so that book established me as firmly in the camp of I am channeling Jesus now. And Theodore stepped in the background, and Jesus came forward. And so then every time I do communicate, have a conversation with the higher dimensions, it's always Jesus who is answering me. If I pose a question, it's always Jesus who is answering me, just like it used to always be Theodore. And so I have really easy access to him. But the funny thing is I developed intuitively so much over the years that I don't really need to have it all put into words. I get downloads of knowings. Like in terms of guiding my personal life, I don't really ask Jesus personal questions particularly. If there's something he wants me to know about our work together, he will ask me, would you like to hear what I have to say about such and such? You know, and I'll say yes, and then he talks to me. But in terms of my day-to-day, I just know what to do. I get the direction. I get what I need to do in terms of our work, and really even in just mundane things. I just know, and I'm just following this flow and this intuitive nudgings of what to do. So there isn't a lot of my mind isn't defining my day. I have enough freedom in my life that I can just go with the flow, and so I just do what arises to be done in our work, and that's a lot of writing on a consistent basis. So,
what would you think? If I could, you know, all of us that are Course in Miracles students, one of the important parts in the course is that Jesus is available to all of us immediately, but in the way the Course in Miracles would put it, as the Holy Spirit. The voice of the Holy Spirit, or the voice, is an important concept in the course. It's really there for all of us, all the time, whenever we need to hear it. Is there any way we would distinguish between that and the kind of experience that you're having, or do you know? Does Jesus talk at all in your writing about our being able to hear on a regular basis, on our own, without being a channel, so to speak? I mean, I know that we do get things. Every once in a while, there'll be something that'll be so incredibly clear that, you know, well, I didn't come up with that myself, but it does come like as an answer. So in my case, poetry, when I get poetry, it sounds, I don't believe I do all that. There's nothing else I'm not going to say that I do channeling, but sometimes it's very much like that. You want to respond to that somehow?
Yeah, well, all of us are guided intuitively by beings on higher dimensions, by our guides, and sometimes perhaps by ascended masters. But we all have guides who guide us intuitively, and our intuition is developed to different degrees. So some people are more intuitive and more easily guided, and some people haven't learned to listen to that guidance or pick up on that as well. Meditation certainly is significant in developing your intuition, and just the willingness to listen to your intuition, to ask. Jesus always suggests that we pray for what we want, pray for guidance if that's what you want, pray to be guided, because then they know that you are really open to receiving guidance to the fullest. Because unless we're really open and say that we are, they only intervene so much. So the more we say, I'm open, ready, and willing to receive guidance from you about this or about anything, they will only do so much to guide us. When we really put that out there and say, really, I want your guidance, I'm really listening to you, they come forward more strongly and they will guide more strongly. So our sincerity and our willingness and openness to them opens the door for them to come closer and work more closely with us. And he's always talking about how important it is for us to open that door, to ask for help, because it shows that then we are ready. It shows them we're ready to receive, because they don't interfere with our free will. And if we're all involved in our egoic mind and our thoughts and our ego and our feelings and our desires, that is, in a sense, a message to them that you're not open, that you're not that open to receiving. You're in love with your egoic mind. Whatever you pay attention to is what you're in love with.
Right.
So if you're in love with your egoic mind and you aren't trying to fall out of love with it, then they let you be in love with your egoic mind until you are tired of it, right? And so then they'll help you fall out of love with it, but you have to ask them.
Yeah.
You have to show that readiness in your spiritual growth. And
That'd be Go ahead.
As for channeling, it is a gift, I'm told, that develops over many lifetimes. So it's something that I have been over many lifetimes. I've apparently done this kind of work over many lifetimes, and I've apparently been close to Jesus over many lifetimes. And that became apparent to me. Well, I grew up Catholic, and I actually loved God and loved going to church so much. I didn't really see the problems of the Catholic Church when I was a child, because I loved going to church. I loved the mystical. I loved God so much as a child. But then I left the church and never thought about it. But when I went on that retreat and Jesus came forward and the ascended masters came forward, I realized that I had a very long history of being a monk and a nun, more nun, being in monasteries many lifetimes, and being devoted to Jesus in those situations and communicating with Jesus. And so that it was kind of nice to reconnect with that lineage and connect with it in a good way, because in those lifetimes, I had a good experience of Catholicism, because it was the monasteries, it was the seclusion, it was the contemplative life. And that's kind of the life I lead now too. I'm really private and very content to do very little in the outer world, which I love Zoom, because we can do it all, right?
We can. It's just remarkable. I was thinking about how talk I gave yesterday, but I used to get up every Sunday morning. I was a minister of a church that was 100 miles from the college where I was going to college.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but I enjoyed it. It was tremendous. And now I think I don't have to drive 100 miles. I just sit on my computer, everybody shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
It's an amazing blessing. And
let's
so
talk a little
Jesus
bit
is,
about some of the changes that are going on right now. You had talked to me earlier about some Jesus perspective on the current status of Christianity in the world today. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, it's really an interesting topic to me, having
Yeah.
been Catholic and having that was a very meaningful thing. And yet I saw all the flaws in the whole Christian thing and just couldn't go back to that anymore at a certain point. So I was very interested when Jesus said he wanted to speak about Christianity. So finally, after I wrote about 4 books, he brought through What Jesus Wants You to Know Today. The subtitle is about himself, Christianity, God, the world, and being human. That kind of covers it.
I can say that, doesn't it?
So, but the whole first chapter of that book is about what he wants you to know about Christianity. And what he wants us to know about Christianity is that he did not found Christianity. He did not write the Gospels. He did not, and some of what is written about him is accurate, but much of it isn't accurate. And what he's most upset about, I would say, or if you could call it that, what he most wanted to make clear is that there are just really a few things that skewed Christianity in the wrong direction. And one of those things is that it deifies him. So he says that he did not raise the body from the dead, that nobody has ever done that. It is not possible to raise the body from the dead. He did appear to people after he was dead, as sometimes people do see apparitions or,
Right.
visions of beings, right, who are in the other dimensions. He was not born of a virgin. He said this has never happened, unless you want to, except for, in vitro, we could do it today.
Yeah, sure.
Virgin births happen all the time today, right?
Yeah,
But that
right.
did not happen. Okay. Right. So these were skews in the story, distortions in the story to deify him. He did
Right.
he did not come to be worshiped. He did not come to establish a religion. He did not come to be deified. He came to teach the truth. And the truth is about love being behind all of life. And any belief in Christianity or otherwise that doesn't support love, that doesn't take you to love, is not a belief that is aligned with the truth, is not what he taught. And so he's very adamant about that. And then there are some other things like original sin or sin in general or hell. These are not beliefs that are helpful to people because they paint us human beings as lesser than God. And his teaching is of non-duality, which is oneness, which is God lives within us. God lives within all of life. God created life and God lives within all of life equally. And so to paint us as sinners is to deny our godhood, our divinity, our inner divinity, and to suppress it in a sense. And to make us feel bad about ourselves is not going to help us connect with our divinity. So the whole concept of sin or to create fear or guilt, as the Catholic Church is so good at doing, punishment and hell and mortal sins. When I grew up, it was a mortal sin if you missed church one Sunday, you were going to go to hell. If you missed church one Sunday, come on,
Right.
this is not right. And Jesus would never have established such a thing. Right. And he wants people to know that because God is love and Jesus is loving. And anything that isn't loving and helping people to connect with the love within them is not Christianity. It's not true Christianity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks ago today, I gave a sermon at a church, and my title came from one line in the Course in Miracles, which says, "Think not that you can see sin." Saying not that you, because if you're seeing sin and you're naming sin and you're saying there's a problem out there, then I might add the next line to that is, "Think not that you can see sin in anyone except yourself," which really means that you've got some work to do because you're seeing the sin.
Right.
So let's take it back to you. Why is it that you're seeing a brother in an unloving way? There must be a different way to see things, you know. So
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And go ahead.
Well, the non-dual teachings that are coming through me are all about seeing that this sin or whatever it is that is causing our suffering and causing us to cause other people to suffer is the ego, is the voice in our head. And so it's all about helping people to see that they are not the voice in their head, to see that this is programming. It's programming that's been given to all of humanity as a challenge. And in a sense, that is Satan. You know, the egoic mind, the negativity of the egoic mind, the hate and whatever that comes from the egoic mind, the voice in our head, all those negative beliefs, that is the devil on our shoulder, right? And so it's just a voice. It's just thoughts. But we're programmed to believe that these thoughts are our thoughts, right? We're programmed to believe that these are meaningful, true thoughts that are our thoughts. And to break through that programming is difficult. So we keep writing about it over and over and over again.
It's very difficult because it's been there for so long. The Course talks about that actually in terms of the dreaming of the world. And so we buy into the world's dream, you know, the cult of culture, and the collusion of illusion, as another friend of mine says it. And we see the problems out there.
Yeah, it keeps getting, you know, even those of us who've awakened and seen through the illusion real clearly, we're still being bombarded by that programming from our culture. And we're still being reprogrammed in a sense. If we don't separate ourselves somewhat from the media, meditate and do things to clear away and get back in touch with the divine, which is real life. You know, get back in touch with nature, with the beauty around you, with what is real and true in this sensory world, and get out of our heads into our body and senses, which is the doorway to the divine self. And so that's what the teaching is really all about.
Just a couple of days ago, my wife and I were in Concord, Massachusetts. Earlier this week, I guess it was on Wednesday, and studying Thoreau a little bit, and that was really the central interest of Thoreau, was finding the truth in nature. I mean, just stopping and just seeing. He said he could sit for a half a day, just sit in his doorstep and just look, and just looking and seeing. But that looking and that seeing wasn't coming from reading a book, or it was reading life itself, reading the truth itself, without being encumbered by rules and regulations and creeds and dogmas and all that kind of stuff that we so easily, the church winds up buying into over time, and then it just becomes a block to the awareness of love's presence, rather than something which helps us to remove the block to the awareness of love's presence. Yeah,
we actually have to learn to just be. How crazy is that?
Yeah. And it's so simple, really, and it's so funny that we would have to make something so simple so difficult.
Yeah. So that's why Jesus stresses meditation and other practices. It's so important to do practices and meditation because they bring you the experience of what it's like to just be, and to look out of your eyes as the divine sees, and to experience life as the divine sees, and to really get to know that space of your divine beingness. Because we know the ego very, very well. Yeah. And we don't need to practice that. We have to practice to get out of it.
Right. And to realize actually that in course it doesn't even exist. I mean, there's actually no such thing as an ego. The ego itself is an illusion. It's not like there's a separate being. It's
Yes.
just a thought. It's an idea. So if it's a thought or it's an idea, then I can let go of that idea. I don't let go of that thought. And it's going to take some work because it's well ingrained.
Right, right.
And like you said, I keep going over it again. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Jesus goes maybe a little farther than saying that it's just a thought, but it's programming. So it's programmed thought, right? So that's why it's so sticky, because it's not just some thought that there's a deeper body of programming that holds it in place, that, you know, that holds those thoughts as a conglomerate in place, that makes them seem like an entity. And part of that, what holds those thoughts in place, a big part of that is desires and fears, which are two sides of a coin, right? If you didn't have desires, you wouldn't be afraid to not get your desires met. There are two things that keep us very tied to the egoic state of consciousness. And they're thoughts, but they don't seem like thoughts. Desires and fears have that emotional component and body component that makes them seem real. So then the illusion feels real because we're feeling it in our body. It's not just a thought, but it is. It is a thought, but it just takes on a bodily sense of rightness.
So there is a way to get free of that. Right? And it's so simple, but we can't do it. I mean, we can do it, but just to change your mind.
A change of mind.
Yeah, about the way you see. Yeah, but then actually to do it. I mean, actually to make that leap that I'm no longer going to continue to allow these fears and desires to take the peace of God away from me. Right?
Choice, right?
Choice, yeah.
Course in Miracle talks about choice, right? Make another choice.
Decision making. So decision making is central. I noticed in the trilogy early on, 3 or 4 chapters in, you have a lot about decision making.
The very first book in the trilogy is called Choice and Will.
Right.
So it all turns on, are you ready to make the choice to be here now in the present moment and to dismiss the mind? Are you ready to make that choice? And first of all, though, you do have to have acquired some distance from your thoughts to even realize there is a choice to be made. Because most people are, like this with their thoughts. They're identified with their thoughts. There's no space between them and their thoughts. So there's no choice. But meditation gives you this distance between your thoughts. So there's some room for choice. And the longer and more you meditate, the more distance there is between you and your thoughts, the more choice there is, the more freedom you have. And being awake is like this. There's no more gravity. There's no more pull between the thoughts and you anymore. They are irrelevant. They're irrelevant. They're in the background. They aren't even yours anymore. So that's the progress, right? When we're egoic, we're like this. And as we awaken, we become more and more detached from the egoic mind and see it through it better and better, more easily. And then at a certain point, boop, we get out of orbit. It's where
the energy's gone.
Yeah, we've lost the gravity of being in that orbit. And so then, we might occasionally go back into that, but we still are always aware of this that is aware. And that's the difference, is you could go back and sound egoic and act egoic, but you won't choose that for very long before you pop back out and say, oh, that was silly. I didn't need to do that.
The way the Course talks about this is it uses two terms, the attraction of God and the attraction of guilt. It's like they're two, like it's a magnetic force between the two. And the guilt pulls us into separation and individuality and and breaking off from the whole and into selfishness and all that stuff. But you feel guilty when you do that. You can't help but feel guilty. The guilt's got this kind of, have another drink. Go ahead, it's okay, yell at somebody. That kind of pull back into insanity. Whereas the attraction for God is just the mystical attraction. It's this thing that's pulling us, the thing that pulled you into starting to do this writing and the memory to, I had the same kind of experiences with the church. I went to just to go to, when other kids would go to, when I was in college, I couldn't afford to go anywhere. When they went on vacation to Florida, I would go to a monastery, New Mallory Abbey in Iowa. And what was it about that pull? And what was it about, what's pulling us in that direction? It's exciting to go to that pull.
Yeah.
It's exciting to get away.
And there's a readiness, right? Not everyone is going to have that pull because their soul's growth is still happening within the egoic realm, and that's fine. And so it's not really for everyone to awaken and to see that. So,
Could we say that eventually, though, it is? I mean, we're all engaged in an evolutionary process. So there are things that happen along the way to begin to wake us up to the recognition that I've got to pay more attention to the pull, the attraction of God, and less attention to this attraction of guilt. Begin to go that way.
Yeah, everyone who is involved in the egoic world is evolving too. They're evolving. They're learning about their human lessons. They're learning to be responsible. They're learning to be reliable. They're learning to be persevering, patient, all the good qualities that are of our divine self. They're learning to develop those good qualities, and they're learning all sorts of lessons. So that learning is as important as learning the truth when we're ready to hear it. And so it's all a process, and we're all in the right place. We're all where we need to be, and we're all being nudged to go forward. Jesus always says it's impossible for you to not learn from your experiences. You're always having the right experience because it's impossible for you to not learn from whatever you're choosing.
Right. I recently went through COVID, 24 days in the hospital, and that's what I came to do in that whole process was to look at this as, I got this for a reason. And part of the reason was 24 days locked into one room, which is really, it was locked in one room. It was a key, but I couldn't go out. They should get back in there, and vice versa, nobody coming. But it was a wonderful, journey into the desert, like a little wilderness journey, like a stepping aside from the world, no computer, nothing like that. So it did provide for this opportunity of going within. We just never know when these opportunities are going to come up, and they may look like it's in an ugly package. But actually, there's a line in the Course that says, you do not realize that somebody you thought your advances were regressions. And what you thought were regressions were advances. I mean, let's say that you had bankruptcy or something, and you thought, I lost all that. Well, what'd you lose? Maybe you learn what's valuable and what's not valuable. That's what we're learning.
Yeah, there are so many things that we can't learn except through extreme situations like what you experienced. Nobody, that experience couldn't have been designed. That growth experience couldn't have been designed or couldn't have been had any other way. So there is a perfect designing that is going on, an unfolding of everybody's plan that is going on. And, it's wonderful when you can have the perspective as you do, to see that, to say yes to even that experience of being in the hospital. Because then you can take
every experience we have, every divorce that we go through, for example, why would I have to learn through this process?
Right.
Every sick child, whatever it is, every accident, of course, is very clear. There are no accidents.
Yeah. These things develop our character in ways that reading a book can't develop our character, Even reading a book about truth doesn't develop our character. The rubber hits the road in real life of
Right.
through these challenging experiences. And that is a theme that runs throughout all of Jesus's books. One book, the second book that he wrote is called Heroic Life. And, as you can imagine by the title, it's about how we can be the hero of our life instead of the victim, right?
Yeah.
And it's by knowing the truth about life that we can become the hero within our life and make the right choices and take the high road instead of the low road, and grow in kindness and love instead of victimhood and revenge or hatred or whatever, which is never the path.
The Course talks about that, what it calls God's plan for salvation. So our job, in a way, is to get plugged into that plan.
Mm-hmm.
To become aware of the fact that there is a plan, and I'm part of that plan, and this is what I'm learning. This is my current classroom that I'm in, and this is what I have to learn in order to graduate. But I've got to the thing is, I've got to pay attention. I got to pay attention, and then I've got to have, you hit it on earlier, willingness.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be willing to do this and not run away. Running away is going to get me nowhere.
I was an astrologer for 25 years. I read people's charts, and I stopped doing that a while back. Not because it isn't super valuable and it wasn't rewarding, but it's a lot of work. And I got kind of tired of talking, but astrology gives you a glimpse into the soul's plan. And it's an amazing, if a good astrologer and an intuitive astrologer can really be helpful to people in saying, you know what, I see that this is a really rough time in your life, but it's all good. And it's going to be over in this amount of time. And these are the things you're learning right now. And so that kind of perspective is really important. So I really appreciate astrology for having given me that basis a long time ago in how to see the world and how to see life and how to help people be more positive about life's situations.
So this leads us to gratitude, to be grateful for this this unpleasantness that I just went through. Part of it because I can now graduate out of that.
Yeah.
And I can look at it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of clarity, a matter of course, it's called vision. Vision enables me to see.
Gratitude is huge. Gratitude, compassion, and forgiveness. Those are tools that we can use on ourselves. We forgive ourselves. We feel compassion for our own humanity, for the human condition of having an ego. It deserves our compassion. And we forgive ourselves when we fall, when we make a mistake, because we will. This is what Jesus is saying. I'm just kind of repeating his teachings here.
Sure.
But compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. Gratitude is the antidote to the ego's negativity. As a practice, it's such a valuable and easy practice.
So thanks for this lesson.
Thank you.
Even though it's not really clear to me what this lesson is teaching me yet, but I will know as I begin to get through it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for even before you can see any good in it. Well, and you can always be grateful for what you're grateful for outside of the difficulty, right? If you can't be grateful for the illness or whatever, you can be grateful that you can see, that you can breathe, that you can walk, that you can love, that you can love. That's one of I love that message that Jesus has given, that no matter what situation you are in as a human being, you always have the capacity to love. So you always have the capacity to be happy.
Right. Which means I always have the ability to turn this around. The Course would say, see differently. Mm-hmm. And then once I can see differently, I can be differently.
That's right. And then life is experienced differently.
Right.
Once your mind changes, right, then
Yeah.
your experience of life changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an exciting life, isn't it? I mean, that we're in this school, learning the kind of things that we're learning. That's a part of the gratitude as well. Just to look at that, to love everything, including the problems I'm going through. Right?
That was maybe one of the biggest differences between before awakening and after awakening for me. Is before awakening, there were times in my life when I just didn't want to be here. I was hypersensitive. So I was like, oh, I don't belong in this earth and this world, this crazy planet of the apes where people are killing each other. I couldn't take it. It was a hard place to be. But I actually, once I awakened, I fell in love with life. And that to me was a miracle. To go from, I don't want to be here, to life is a gift. It's an amazing gift. So it is something that I do hope to be able to bring or share somehow with other people.
The Course in Miracles, every religion in the world defines God as love. The Course also defines God as life. As life itself. God is life. So life is love and love is life, and the more in love you are, the more alive you are, the more alive you are, the more in love you are. Which just makes it keep getting more exciting all the time if I'm willing to go that way.
Right.
I look at the clock and I see we're right at 5 minutes till 1. I said we take a break at this point. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. And during this time, Bud will look at some of the comments that come up in the chat. We come back and talk about those. And then you have the opportunity to talk to Gina directly yourself. So, Buddy, all set we're going to go into a 10-minute intermission. You'll be hearing Jeff Olmsted and our Interfaith Fellowship Choir that we had in New York City are going to be singing in the background for you. And do whatever you need to do. We will see you at 5 after 1.
I am not a body. I am free, for I am still as God created me. I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. I am not a body,
It looks like we're back, and the next part we're going to do now is Bud's been looking over some of what's been going on in the chat, and he will present some of that, ask some questions, and then if you as an individual would like to talk to Gina, just raise your hand and you'll be put online, and you can do that. By the way, I saw during the chat that some of you are having trouble hearing my voice. I don't know what to do about that. I hope everything's in order.
You and I'll talk about it later, John.
Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
All right. As long as you can hear me. Thanks. So, Bud, what do you got?
So this first question is for Gina. What is the process you're going through before transmission when you take off your glasses and close your eyes? So someone has obviously watched you go through this process.
Yeah, maybe I should just introduce what's meant by these transmissions. In a couple, let's see, it was 2017. Jesus asked my husband and I if we'd be willing to do Christ consciousness transmissions online for people. And so we act as antennas who bring through Christ consciousness energy, and people attend our online meetings and they receive this Christ consciousness energy. I just posted on the chat a link to my website, to the FAQ page that has information about transmissions, and at the very top of that page on my website on radicalhappiness.com, there is a link, a Zoom link, to go to our Zoom room where we do these transmissions. And we are, in fact, going to do one of these transmission meetings right after this at, 2 o'clock Eastern time. It's 11 a.m. Pacific time. And so you're all welcome to jump on and jump over to our Zoom room and experience for yourself what a transmission is. So in answer to your question, before we do a transmission, I'm inviting Jesus to overlap his energy onto mine. And so what my experience is that he comes down and overlays his energy. And I take off my glasses only because people want to see my eyes. It's not, because Jesus has suggested that we do it that my husband and I do it with our eyes open, and that people look into our eyes, because there's a transmission through the eyes. So I take my glasses off just because somebody wrote me once and said, I can't see your eyes because of your glasses. So I had to take them off, right? I can't see. But then again, actually, I move into a place, I'm actually in a samadhi state. I move into a state where I'm not really very present. I'm there. I mean, I know what's going on, but I'm super still, and I'm experiencing Jesus looking out of my eyes. And so it's a very uplifting experience. So when I'm sitting there, before I open my eyes, I'm invoking and inviting Jesus to overlay his energy. And then when I feel that that energy is there, I open my eyes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So here's a couple other questions. And some of these you've alliterated or inferred earlier. One person's basically asking, one challenge I find is after about 5 years of pulling back from the world and doing internal work, I'm compelled to go back into the world to do my work. Can you suggest how we might dive back into the world and to be in it, but not of it?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because the world will easily pull us into their rules and their perceptions and their structure, a very structured life in which we have to do things at a certain time, and we can't just be in the flow. If you can be in the world in a way that's self-directed, by not working for somebody else, or working in a structure that allows you a certain amount of freedom and flow, that really helps. Because some structures are really going to hold you tight into a kind of an egoic place where you have to do what somebody else is telling you all the time. And if that doesn't even feel right, then how do you stay connected? So it depends. So the point is to try to stay connected to the divine, to the flow as you're in the world, and not be listening to the tyrant in our head that tends to control and structure our entire life. The voice in our head goes, do this, do that, do this now, stop, hurry up. You're not working fast enough. You'll never get that done. You need to get all these other things done. We have to set that aside. And so hopefully, when you go back into the world, you can be in some kind of a structure, at least some of the time, where your juice can just flow, your joy can just flow, and where you're acting out of joy and doing whatever you do in the world, it's in joy. What Jesus has told me is that if you're moving and you're not in joy, stop. And just take a few minutes and rest or do something different. So don't keep pushing when you're not in joy, when you're stressing out or striving. Notice that and stop and take a break, do something different, or breathe, or do any of the number of things that you can do to align with your divine nature. listen to a song, plug yourself into some beautiful music for a few minutes or something like that. But don't keep pushing and striving in that direction, because that's the ego. So when you stop being in joy with what you're doing, stop and do something else and find where your joy is. What is it enjoy? What do you enjoy now? And if you can do your work in that way, then you can be flowing from that place. But as I said, there are some kinds of work that it's pretty, it's hard to be in that flow and not be at the mercy of other egos who are demanding that you do and strive. So, but there are a number of things in all of the books, bridges into presence, like taking deep breaths or saying a prayer or just getting into your body and senses, listening to music, just switching gears so that you can get back in alignment. So then you can find out, well, what is it I really need to do now or want to do now? What is it really true to do now? And so if you can learn to live like that, it's life can be just so enjoyable. And it's amazing how much you can actually get done, because this that we are is interested in doing in the world and getting things done. But you end up getting things done in a joyful way. You enjoy it. Doesn't feel like, oh, that's something I have to do. If it feels like, oh, if you're doing it from that place, you're doing it from the ego. So find out what it is you really are moved to do in the moment and do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question for both of you. Can you speak to the celestial speed up?
Yes. I think celestial, it's definitely happening, and that's the best way we could say it. I think we're experiencing all kinds of ways now. One of the ways that I mentioned earlier that we're experiencing this is we're experiencing it in terms of the death of the church. The church is dying very, very rapidly. The Methodist Church has lost 60% of its membership in the past 60 years. That's incredibly fast. And it's the same is true for the Presbyterians and the Lutherans and across the board. And it's for a very simple reason, because we're looking to go deeper than rules and regulations and creeds and dogmas have been able to help us to move. People need to think this through for themselves, to wake up on their own without some sort of authority being an external authority. What we want to do is move to the internal authority, namely to the Christ within, and pay attention to that. Just as Gina has been paying more attention to Jesus in every day in her life, we can all do exactly the same thing. We can listen, of course, I would say, to the voice of the Holy Spirit and how that's guiding us. And by doing things like A Course in Miracles or following any other discipline, the Course says very clearly, it says there are many thousands of pathways back to God again. So get on the path. And that path is it's an inner path. Whatever is directing you inside, not outside. I mean, you can do all kinds of things outside in the world, make money, that sort of thing. I think we need to do that to the point where we're taken care of. We don't have to worry about the externals. But as long as we're doing that, then we turn around and go within. And technology has been one of the things that's opened us up as well. It's amazing that we can sit here in front of our computers and talk with people all over this country and some people from outside of the country. That's very, very exciting. And that's going to keep happening that way. There's more ways of connecting. Connection is the important thing, and that's the way that we're going to be growing. There's also a lot of good teachers online now. Just study it, move around a little bit, look and see whatever that interests you. There's somebody that's talking about it, and it's not happening within the context of an institution. There's other ways it's growing. The Black Lives Matter, that's made a big difference. It's not done, but it's made a big difference. The hashtag #MeToo, that's making a big difference. It's not done, but it's making a big difference. There's so many of these different processes. We're actually becoming more and more free and not so much being pushed down by some sort of institution or government or totalitarian system. That's the way I see this celestial speed up. And also, just in terms of what we're doing today, more and more people are hearing Jesus talking
Mhm.
to them, and then they're turning around and being able to talk about that as well. So that's my take on that, Gina.
I can't improve on that. I haven't heard that phrase, celestial speed up, but I think you answered that question very nicely. So,
Okay. It's a concept that it's not actually in the Course in Miracles, but it's something that Helen heard, and it is in the autobiography about her life, that she heard that we are engaging in a celestial. And it's very clear if you look around, we are indeed getting, things are happening faster. That's very exciting.
yeah.
And what's really good about it, I love this quote from Buckminster Fuller, where he says, you don't overcome the old by opposing it. You overcome it by making it obsolete through superior methodology. Well, that's what's happening. We got a superior methodologies are going on, which will enable us not to have to fight with the past, but just to be able to move into the future in such a way that the old systems will just automatically fail on their own. Not bad, not good, just fails. Just dies, like old things die. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Bud?
So here's another one. We've got a couple here. We got some great questions today. So you mentioned here and also in one of the YouTube videos, you can't fully develop your character from just reading. You need to participate in life. That seems to point at the reason why we incarnate. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. It's life is a school, and it's in this particular dimension and on this particular planet, which is a very dense planet. There are many other worlds that are much easier than our world, but we are designed to grow through suffering, through challenge. And it's just the way it is here. It's baked in the cake here. So that might as well be accepted. And of course, what I'm saying is what Jesus says, almost anything that I'm saying today, I'm saying because it's also in the teachings. So challenges are the way the school of life carries out its business. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Gina, should your books be read in any particular order?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Fortunately, no, they can be read in any order. They're laid out in a pretty organized fashion where the first chapters usually introduce the terms used. So in that sense, they can be a little repetitive from one book to another. But I also understand that repetition is useful in breaking down the programming. But they stand on their own. And no, I do think that there might be some books that I would recommend. If somebody actually asked me, well, which one should I read first? Seems like In the World, but Not of It, is maybe my most popular book and also a really good basic book. That's one that I often will recommend as a first book. Also, if you want to go back to reading a book that I wrote before Jesus, the book I wrote right before Jesus showed up was called From Stress to Stillness, and Tools for Inner Peace. And that book is a really good basic introduction to everything that I'm teaching. And it's in words or language that's fairly acceptable. So like if you happen to know somebody who's not open to Jesus channeling, From Stress to Stillness, which is just in my own voice, has the basic teachings and a lot of good information about how to get into presence, how to live in presence, and what the egoic mind is like for somebody who's not open to channeling or Jesus.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talk a lot in the trilogy about programming and software. How do we best change our programming once we're aware of it to make choices that are in alignment with our awakening?
Well, anytime you choose against the programming, in other words, anytime you don't follow the path of least resistance, you are nullifying the programming. It's just that it takes a lot of repetition. So every time you choose to turn away from that judgment and not speak it, you've weakened that particular judgment. Whereas if you give voice to it, you've strengthened it. You've kept it going. So the more we stop giving voice to our programming, the weaker it gets. So, that's the path. The path is not taking the path of least resistance, not speaking that judgment, not speaking that negativity, not speaking that anger. And that's not repressing anger. It's just being a good human being, right? Our mothers taught us not to be nice, right? So
I'm not sure everyone's mom taught them that, Gina, but let's go with that.
not in this day and age, right? I mean, we've regressed. We've gone back to caveman. Seems like I don't know what happened to our etiquette.
I have a CD I made a few years ago. It's called Word Fasting, the Miracle Diet, which is just asking us to pay attention to the words that come out of our mouth and see what that's saying, and then see if we can just drop that so that it doesn't become a part of our vocabulary anymore. Because it's obviously going in a wrong direction,
And also notice how those words feel energetically, subtly in your body, because judgments don't feel good. And Jesus is always pointing this out. He says, notice how your body feels when you give voice to the ego. It doesn't feel good. You're hurting yourself. Notice how the body feels when you give voice to a compliment, to saying something nice. That's your guidepost. How does it contract you or does it relax you? It's pretty simple that way. So pay attention to the body also.
Course in Miracles says you can't hurt somebody else without hurting yourself. That's all. It always boomerangs. You're not realizing it's always boomeranging, but then there's part of you that's going to feel guilty because you know you did something wrong. And guilt is not a pleasant feeling. So why would we deliberately do something that's going to boomerang back at us and make us feel bad?
Yeah, people wonder, how do I overcome my low self-esteem? Well, be nice.
Yeah, very good.
Don't
how to overcome the same things about depression. How to overcome my depression? Well, start being a little bit more responsible, and you'll probably find out that you don't feel so depressed. It's pretty simple in that context, right? Yeah,
because when we're judgmental or nasty, we feel bad about ourselves. How can we have good self-esteem when we're not behaving nicely, when we're not being loving? So, you can only love your divine self. It's asking too much to love your egoic self. I mean,
there you go. You love your egoic self out of existence, as we were saying earlier.
You can have compassion for your egoic self.
Sure.
Have compassion, have forgiveness for your egoic self. But if loving means having compassion for it, then by all means love it. But what Jesus said something recently, he said the ego is just programming. You don't have to love it. It is not a thing. It is not an entity. It does not deserve your love. It just deserves your inquiry, see through it.
Anything else, Bud?
I like that it just deserves your inquiry. So along that same vein, let's see if we can turn this into a proper question. We aren't the body mind, but actually divine energy or conscious that is flowing through this. When we make this conscious shift, this awareness shift, our awakening seems to flow more easily. So the question is, I would like to hear how God, the life force arising in our breath, brings the body mind to life.
I don't
breath,
think I
is that what you said?
Yeah, I would like to hear how God, the life force arising in our breath, brings the body mind to life.
That's a mystery, isn't it? I don't think I have the answer.
It's an interesting question.
I don't have an
Yeah.
answer either.
Yeah,
It's a miracle. It's the miracle of life. It's a mystery that we don't understand.
As an aside, coming out of COVID, one of the things that happened was that I lost my breath.
Mm.
I couldn't breathe very well. It took a while. But I started practicing pranayama yoga and doing the things that would be necessary to get that back. And by golly, the energy came with it. It was pretty simple, really. All right. So do you want to go to the individual questions now?
we've got one more that I think is
Okay, do that.
I'm going to combine a couple of them together.
Okay.
So here's the two questions, and then you'll see how they work together. How do you deal with human suffering, especially in this dark time in America? And what is Jesus's main message on how to let go of fear?
I'm going to answer the second question first because it's a really easy answer. He wrote a book, Jesus Speaking, on overcoming fear and developing trust. And that there is everything he has to say about that is in that book. Overcoming fear is a matter of overcoming a negative thought about the future, because that's primarily what fear is. Unless you're talking about the instantaneous fear that gets you to run from a tiger, which isn't really what we're talking about. That hardly ever happens. Most of our fear is self-generated. It's a negative thought about the future. And seeing that is overcoming that. But you have to do some inquiry into all of those thoughts, because there are many thoughts that make up a fearful thought. But fear is very believable, because once you believe a fearful thought, your body responds chemically. And so then it seems like that thought must be true, because your body's afraid, right? Because you feel it. And people are programmed to trust their feelings, which is kind of a problem, because feelings stem from thoughts. So if you're trusting your feelings, like, I feel afraid, therefore it's true. No, it stemmed from a false thought. Your fear stemmed from a false thought. So no, this fear isn't true. But if people could only see that, we would be free of so much suffering. But they believe their fear, and they don't see that it stemmed from a false thought. So that's part of it. Do you want to say something, John?
What was the first question again? There was a two-part to that
About
question.
suffering.
Yeah, it was about dealing with human suffering. And the reason that I put those two together is because suffering is another aspect of, well, I'll let you guys talk to it.
Well, I'm not sure if you mean with your own suffering or other people's suffering. Compassion is how I would deal with other people's suffering, and because you have to feel compassion for this human condition in which everyone suffers, because everyone has an ego.
Yes.
And if you understand that you're suffering because you have an ego, then that's half the battle in overcoming one's own suffering. Why am I suffering? As long as you believe that you're suffering because somebody said something to you, or somebody did something to you, or something out there happened to you, and that caused you to suffer, you're not going to be free of suffering, because that isn't the cause of your suffering. The cause of your suffering is the story that you say to yourself about whatever's happening. So if somebody says something nasty to you, if it didn't hook something in you and start some negative thought of, he doesn't like me and I need him to like me, it wouldn't matter what he said. So it always stems from something within you, some thought that you had, some story you said to yourself about whatever happened. That's your suffering. That's freedom from suffering, is seeing that you are responsible for your suffering. If you think if you think something or someone else is responsible, you'll never be free of it.
It's always simply a matter, it seems to me, of compassion, and compassion is a natural response. We want to help. We want to be there. We want to be engaged in the loving process. It's amazing that you think you don't. I watched a thing on YouTube just actually early this morning, which is about animals helping animals. Even animals helping other animals that you wouldn't have thought would have helped, like an elephant helping a lion. Really, this was you can go on YouTube and watch it, right? That tendency to love and to really be love is inside every one of us. We just need to breed it all the more and give expression to it, however that's going to happen. That's wonderful.
I like that answer. Overcome your suffering by giving love.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It's so simple, really. I mean, to realize that everybody, it doesn't make any difference who they are. This is my brother. This is my sister. And I have to see that this is my brother. I have to see that this is my sister. And I love them as my brother, as my sister, not just some sort of stranger, actually, even, right? So
Love is always the answer.
it is, and it's so simple. It's so simple. You know, the Beatles got it right. All you need is love.
Exactly. So we've got one more big question that I want to address. We've got a couple of them that have come in, but I think this one is going to be interesting. I'm a longtime course student and have been reading Gina's books for a few months. One difference I see is that the course, at least according to some ACIM teachers, teach that God did not create the world and doesn't even know it exists, that it was created by us with the ego in order to hide from God. Gina's Jesus seems to be teaching that God created the world and that we each may have a special role to play in creation. That creation has a purpose that we may not be able to fully understand. Can John or Gina comment on this seeming difference?
This is the one difference that I've heard from ACIM students who write me asking me to answer this question. And I have a hard time answering it because I am not a student of ACIM. So John, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. I of course. It's not a problem. He didn't create a society. He didn't create this insane mind. He didn't create anything that's external in that sense. You know, the kingdom of heaven is inside you. It's not in your body. It's in your mind. That's the thing which is real. The spirit is the thing which is real. Let's don't worry about the outside world. That's not real in that sense. That's part of what our experience is right now. In space-time, we experience ourselves in space-time. The Course says you should not deny the seeming, underline the word seeming, reality of the body. It really seems like we're a body living in space-time at this moment. But the Course is really clear also that this is a dream. You're having this dream that you're in this place. And what we talk about, we're talking about, you talked, Gina, a moment ago about the fact you had an awakening. Well, we have this awakening. When you awaken, what do you awaken to? You awaken to the fact there's a lot more going on than what's happening within the context of the external world or the physical world, what seems to be outside you. You know, what happens to any one of us, you know, we're all going to die pretty soon. I mean, the next 20 years or so, number of people in this presentation will not be here at all, right? So where are you then? You know, what's going on then? Then you've stepped aside from this particular dimension, if you will, of insanity, and it is a certain level of insanity. Of course, it's very clear about that. It says this is an insane world, and never underestimate the extent of its insanity. It's insane because the ego rules. And as long as the ego rules, that we'll continue to experience the insanity. Now, what we said before, which was really good news, is I think we're evolving out of the insanity. We're slowly, there's a growth in spirit thing that's happening. We are, as a people, waking up. And we see that, you know, one of the good ways that we might see this is that I think we're finally learning to stop having wars. Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be great.
Realize what kind of insanity that is. This is a world, when you study history, you study wars. That's the primary way you study history in the history book, right? Well, it's time we grew up and said, no more. I ain't going to study war no more. And I'm going to lay down my sword and shield. Seriously, I'm going to lay down my ego. I'm going to lay down my attack thoughts, and I'm going to lay down my defensiveness both at the same time. If I can lay down my attack and my defensiveness, that changes this whole thing that we call the world. But the world, keep in mind, is just the outside. The kingdom of heaven is inside you, in your mind, not in your body, period.
Mhm. Yeah, Jesus is clear that a consciousness shift is necessary before the world will change, because it's being created based on egoic perceptions,
Right.
which is a dog eat dog, fight or flight, survival of the fittest type of perception. That's the world that we have because the majority of people are in their egos. But yeah, the more people who wake up, and there are more and more people, that's the celestial speed up, right? That
Yep.
there are more people waking up today than as ever before. I mean,
Right.
just think of in Helen Schuckman's time, the 70s, when I was a young thing, hippie, right?
Yeah.
We were trying to change the world then, and
Sure.
we didn't even know what we had. Ram Dass, but we didn't have language for any of this. We didn't have language for the truth. It was very obscure. It was very covered over. We used the word consciousness or cosmic consciousness. Who knew what enlightenment was even then? I mean, it just in those years, in my lifetime, we have language. And, I think Eckhart Tolle was a huge pioneer in bringing us language of being in the now and the egoic mind. That was really helpful for the general public. And I've used those words, but until we have language for something like the egoic mind and language for being present in the now, how can we shift into that consciousness? There has to be some way to speak about it, some way to share from one person who's awake and to another. We need language to speak about that consciousness so that that consciousness can catch fire. And so a lot of what's been taking place over these decades is building these building blocks of truth. A Course in Miracles is that, is building a language for the truth. And it has its whole world of the way it describes things. And many of those terms are also understood by everybody else too. So, but that was the work. I mean, and that was in the 70s when Helen Schuckman was building that language, right? That language for the truth. We can't take that for granted because it wasn't there before. It really wasn't. We were very limited in how we could speak about things. And so, things can change much more quickly because we know the problem. We can pinpoint it. We can speak about it. We can say, look, I know the truth. I know the way out. I know where freedom is. Here it is. And we can say it in plain language that isn't, gurus and Sanskrit and things like that, because they did know the truth too.
Let's go to we only have about 15, 20 minutes left. So, Lynn, I see you've got a question or observation. Let's go with that. And then let's see if anybody else has like to raise their hand and talk to Gina.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure listening to you guys. Always, John, Gina, your experiences are amazing. When you first started talking, my life is A Course in Miracles. And you were talking about channeling, and I'm thinking, but, like to tap in in the Course language, you're tapping into Jesus inside of yourself. You're tapping into Thomas inside of yourself. It's I think Thomas, you said.
Theodore. It's okay.
Thank you, Theodore. But it's so wonderful. No matter which way it comes, there is a speed up, and we're, you can convinced me, it's channeling is one of the ways, even if, don't give it to the mind to figure out, it all comes together. And thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to say that, channeling is a way that wisdom has come to earth over millennia, really.
Okay.
And it's also true that not everybody is bringing through the truth in the same way. There's, not all channels are equal. And it's important to understand that not all channeling is coming from a high source. And I just want to say that without going into any great detail, but you do need to be discriminating. A channel should be very connected to God, in love with God, not egoic, in service. How egoic the channel is extremely important, because if they aren't really dedicated to the truth, they're not going to reach beings who are dedicated to the truth. Mm-hmm. So, go out there in the world of channeling and say yes, but be very careful, because it requires spiritual development to reach higher dimensions, especially of ascended masters.
Let's go to Jim. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, I started reading A Course in Miracles back in 1981, and it was my go-to source for comfort and understanding, which has grown exponentially, I think, having read Gina's number of Gina's books in the last few years. And the place it's got me to is really more understanding what was kind of a phrase that was a nice phrase to say, meaning I'm not a human having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual person having a human experience. So making that shift puts it into a whole different perspective, out of which it's easier to let go of the ego voice in my head.
Yeah, and you know what? You could describe that moment of awakening that I experienced. You could describe it as that. It's like before awakening, you're a human having a spiritual experience. After awakening, you're a spiritual being. You know that in your bones, not just intellectually. You know yourself as a spiritual being who's having a human experience. That's a beautiful way to put it, actually. I never thought of it that way. Right. Or I described it similarly, but with not such nice, simple words. So, yeah, I like that.
Well, so you've got about 15 minutes to spend a minute with Gina. If you'd like to talk to her, you can do so.
Elmar has his hand raised.
Who does? Go ahead.
Elmar,
Yes.
I know Elmar.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I had a question about your story, Gina, when you, which you told earlier about first coming in contact with Jesus when you have been to the retreat and you were in the garden or somewhere and you sat in front of the statue of Mother Mary, and you said it somehow came alive. And for me, it's hard to imagine how a statue can come alive. Could you explain it more detailed? Like, did you see a picture or just did you see an energy around the statue?
Well, pretend that you're not looking at reality, but you're looking at like you're looking at a TV show where they do graphics, like a cartoon or something. And it just started moving like an animated, of course the statue didn't stay the same. It sort of took on took on a shape and a visionary look itself. But it's like with computer graphics, if you imagine something coming alive and moving, that wasn't that wasn't alive. It's like that visually.
So probably the statue itself did not move, but it was just an energy.
Absolutely. The
saw.
statue itself did not move. I can guarantee
Okay.
that.
The
That's
That would have
statue
been
didn't
something.
change.
We do have a physical world, but
Yeah.
there's this overlay of another dimension, right?
okay.
So then you're seeing with eyes that are seeing into another dimension where there's a vision overlapping it. Yeah. That's
Okay.
Vision is a good idea. Visionary.
Thanks.
Yeah. Never happened before. It was a new thing. It's kind of cool. Got my attention.
One thing I'll make an observation about that, having studied this all for years, not just what's with Gina and all that, but going back, I think it's interesting how the channel talks within the language of the time. Like Gina has computer language in her talking about what she's teaching. You wouldn't find that in the course. But I noticed recently in the course there's this passage about things we buy with paper strips and metal discs the world proclaims as valuable and real. That's talking about money. Well, we don't use money so much anymore. It's more like plastic cards that we use to buy what we buy with. So things evolve over time, so you can expect that there's going to be changes in vocabularies and the way we approach things. Although one thing I think is really nice about the course is that Helen had a great love of the King James Version of the Bible and of Shakespeare, and you see both of those languages. It's the same language because they were written exactly at the same time. Historically, it was written during the same decades.
Yeah, I think computer language has really advanced, has really helped us understand spiritually what's going on with the ego. To call it programming, to be able to understand what that is. I think we didn't have, like I said before, we didn't have language for that before. And now we have computers, so we understand, programming. We get what that is, and that's pretty cool. And I think, John, also, a channel is going to use the language, the education, the culture, their background, and also what they're willing and what they're interested in bringing through. So, Helen, what probably was, Jesus knew Helen and what she was willing to bring through and what she was willing to talk about and not talk about. And, like, for instance, I'm an astrologer. So Jesus can talk about astrology through me, but I bet you he couldn't talk about astrology through Helen. And she wouldn't have been interested probably. So what Jesus brings through different channels is geared towards the channel and is limited by the channel to some extent too. It's circumscribed by their interests, by their willingness, by their education, their vocabulary. I could not channel scientific information. I couldn't channel, a lot of things, but I can channel metaphysics and astrology and psychology and the truth, awakening, because that's what I've studied all my life. And I haven't studied much else. I have a general education, but.
It's interesting. Helen and Bill were very deep into depth psychology, especially Jung and Freud and Shakespeare was an interest of Helen's, as I mentioned earlier. And you see all that coming out in the course. There's the depth psychology there of Freudian kind of terminology and some Jungian, not a lot. Helen was not big on Jung. But certainly there is Shakespeare and certainly is the King James.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad my master's degree was good for something because I didn't really use it in any kind of traditional way. I've never been traditional, so.
John Sunday, and he's always up there next to John Mundy. Okay. Hi.
Funny, John. Hi, Gina. Thank you very much. I really loved it, appreciated it, and I love so many of the insights that you shared with us today. I love the programming aspect. I've heard it, but never so profoundly as you expressed it. I want to honor you for that. And I have a question about what you just said right now about the channeling. And my understanding about of psychology, and I'm glad I'm speaking to you, because is an understanding of the creative power of thought as basically a law, and the amenability of thought to control by suggestion. So when I hear you saying that you're not going to be channeling scientific stuff, you channel your expertise. May I offer you the idea that, or I'm questioning, is that when you study metaphysics and you got questions about metaphysics, that's exactly what your answer is going to be. And so it doesn't matter what field you're in, if you're focused and concentrated on something, that's the suggestion that's being put in. And this is my understanding. And the answers will be delivered to you in according to your personality, blah, blah, blah. So I wonder if you might comment on that idea that I'm sharing with you.
Was there a question?
The creative power of thought and the amenability of thought to control by suggestion. And I'm just wondering if you see any connection to that with your ability to, or anybody's ability to channel material from the other productive entities or unseen productive sources.
Well, I'm not sure if this is helpful, but when I channel, I have to have a completely quiet mind. So if I start thinking, it interrupts the receiving. So my mind is set aside when I'm hearing, when I'm channeling. So it's offline. So that is something I learned to do, was to have a completely quiet mind, because otherwise it stops it. It makes it jerky. I can't be. I could stop and ask a question in the middle when I'm channeling and I'll get an answer. But if I'm writing a book, my mind has to be completely set aside, and I'm just hearing and I'm just typing, and that's all that's happening. And if I start thinking, it stops, right? If I ask a question. So I'm not creating anything when I'm thinking. I'm not creating anything when I'm channeling, because I'm not thinking. So I'm not sure if that is anywhere around what you're asking.
Yeah, you're coming pretty close, because my question was really about what you mentioned earlier about being open and willing to stuff, open and willing to hear stuff. So basically, I'm not going in to solve a problem. I know there's a problem or an issue, but I'm not looking there to solve this, but I'm going in with an openness and no thought to solutions coming to me. So my awareness is open to solutions before I go, as a prerequisite to going into my trance or my state. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if that would jive for you.
Well, definitely. I'm just open and willing. I'm not in any kind of, I don't go into any trance state when I'm channeling. I could be doing anything. I could be walking around the house and having a conversation. So I don't need, that's what conscious channeling is. When you're fully developed as a channel, you can channel while you're doing things. You're not in any kind of special state. If somebody asked me, I don't have scientific language in my vocabulary, but if a scientist asked me something that used scientific language that was an answer, a yes or no question, I could get a yes or no, something like that. I could pull that through, but because I don't have the language, I could not respond to a scientific question, because even if the person asked in language, I wouldn't have the language to answer them in scientific language.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap things up here, Jeff.
Yeah, Gina's got to go to her next meeting, which is starting in like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
You all can hang on for a little while to discuss things if you want to, but Gina's got to Gotta go
And
today.
I'd like to invite anybody on this call to come over to that if you would like to. You don't need to donate. You can just go to the Zoom link. I don't know if Bud put that link up, or I put a link up to my website to this, right.
Radical happiness.
Yes, that radical happiness link will take you to the page where at the very top of that page, there's a Zoom link. And if you click on that, you'll enter my husband's Zoom room, which I'm about to join him in. And then you can experience our transmission, which is a combination of a recorded audio message followed by an energetic transmission. It only takes 50 minutes or so. So it's not very lengthy.
Thank you so much, Gina, for being with us today. I look forward to dialoguing with you further in the future. Great that you're here.
Thank you
For
so
some
much.
of the rest of you, if you'd like to hang on and dialogue for a few minutes, I'll stay on for a while. Gina, thank you.
Okay, I enjoyed it so much. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Bye, Gina.
Bye,
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.